Okay, hey, I want to do a video to show the scripting language we made for Modbox. So the primary reason we made this scripting language in Modbox was because we needed a way for players to be able to create scripts and logic while in VR and while editing with other players. So rather than doing text-based scripting, we needed something you could drag and drop in VR and edit at runtime, and that all changes you make to the code would sync with other players. And we also want to make it very easy to make multiplayer games. So rather than usual coding a multiplayer game, we need to think of a client and a server and who has what information to send. Everything you do in scripting is automatically networked, and you never have to think of what the server sees or what the client sees. Everything just works and syncs. So just to show an extreme example of what we're using the scripting language for, um, right now all the character AI is scripted to find enemies, to respond to damage, to shoot the gun that they have in their hand. So all the prefabs that come with Modbox usually have their own scripting. And there's also these game managers, which are logic to create the players and show the AI at the right time. This is all created in the same scripting language that you can edit and customize in your creations. But I'll start with something simple just to start a tutorial of it. So what I'll do is I'll go and I'll add a sci-fi door right there, and then I'll add a button. So what I want to do, and I'll get rid of that, what I want to do is when the player jumps on this button, open that sci-fi door. So if I go into test world and select the sci-fi door, it has this animation controller on it and its own scripting to just play a sound. But in its animation controller, it has this animation open toggle. If I toggle that, it opens. Um, so what I want to happen is when the player jumps on that button, set this to true. So I'll go back to edit mode. And what I'll use is the wiring tool. So rather than going into the whole scripting and trying to start working on making your own scripting assets and stuff like that, an easy way to begin is just using the wiring tool, which uses the same scripting language underneath, but it's easier to get into and easier just to point at one entity and say, do this thing to another entity. So it's a little bit closer to, say, blueprints in Unreal or like other scripting languages in other building games. So I'll start with the wiring tool, and I'll select the button and the door. And I'll say, I have to add an event that happened. So I'm looking for an event when the button is pressed. So what I'll do is I'll add an event on event, and now I need to select in the button. I need to select which component has the pressed event. So that would be this button part, and then button down event. So I selected this event right here, and this would be the entity that pressed the button. So what I want to do is open the door. So I'll go run set in the sci-fi door, and I want to go in its animation controller and animation open to true. And then we'll try that out. There, and it's open. Okay, so if I want to do something a little bit more advanced and more things, what I could do is I could go print, let's just print out whoever hit the button. So we'll print the player's name who hit the button, and then if we want to do something else like set a value in the world, say the gravity in the world to 0. I'll go set in the world and environment gravity to 0. And then something else we could do if we want to do something, say whoever pressed the button, if we want to do something on them, I'll go add another action, not set, we want to do, and then go in the person that pressed the button. Let's go in their main component and die. So when someone jumps at the button, they will gravity will turn to 0 and they will die. Let's try that. And yeah, that worked fine. And gravity is now 0. Okay, so to show another example of this, I'll add a cube, and then I'll color it white, and I'll edit it again. Well, I'll add wiring to it. So with the wiring tool, you can just wire things to themselves, just to do scripting on itself rather than another thing. So I'll just select that and go, let's say on event main start. So when this thing starts, then we'll go set in the cube color to at a color random. So when I did that, when I went set, it shows me what it's looking for this set line. So I added this set line that's going to set some value, and it says it's expecting some variable that it can edit. So I need to select a variable then. So I go color, it's still selecting a variable because I selected the color component, and finally I selected the color variable. And now, because I selected that, it now is expecting a color. So it's looking for a color for something. So I could say put in a value directly. I could add a color here, like make it red, or I could do something like in the world look for another entity and then get its color from that sort of thing, or get the color from the player. But for this, I'll just go color random. So I can just go on the start, change to a random color. And when we'll change this to update, so they'll just get a random color 10 times a second, like that. Right, so now what we'd like to do, if I wanted to move this out of wiring and say make a component out of it, and if it was a component, that way I could add it to other things, I could check if entities have it, and I could start adding variables and make it a little bit more complex rather than just this wiring. So what I'll do is I'll go options, copy wiring code, and what I could do with this is, with the copy wiring code, I could copy it to another wiring, but what I'll do is I'll actually edit this and I'll add a component to this cube. I'll go random color component. So I added a script to this, I added an MP script to this cube, and I called it random color. And then in this, I'll right click and I'll paste the code. And there's the code that we made in wiring, but now we have a random color component. And when I go to play mode, it'll still pick a random color. And now I can do other things, like I can add let's go add a new variable. Let's call this should do random color. So this is just a toggle that I can set if it should add a random color. And oh wait, I gotta edit that. So I'll go if should random color. I'll move this under there. And now it'll only set the random color if that is set to true. So in that, I can hit that and then toggle that off and on. So now if I want to use this component with other stuff, like another entity, I can just add it to another entity. But since it uses this color component, I want to add that color component. I want to make sure that color component is also added to that other entity. So I'll add it as a required component. And I'll select color to tell whatever it has, this random color component needs color. And then now when I add it to another entity, I'll go to play mode just to show. Let's add it to this hemisphere thing. And then I'll go and add random color. And it adds the color component automatically, and now when I go and select the hemisphere, I can turn on random color to have it be a random color. Okay, so now that I have this component, I'll show some more advanced stuff you can do with the MP script. So one thing I should say is that you can always edit with text also, and if you do have any familiarity with programming languages, it's very I like to Python or C# once you're entering it with text, and I can go then and start copying in. I can paste in a large amount of code, but I'll go if enabled and then set that. And I'll make a bunch of those just to demonstrate. There. I'll select a few of those and then put them in the trash. So the way that MP script runs is that everything, all code runs on events. So you pretty much just add events, and then when something happens, either the start or the update of this entity, or when it's removed, or when it dies, run some code. So I can also do, along with all the events that happen on the entity, I can also do any variables that change. So this should do random color. I could go on change, and I've dragged this into there to make that the event. And now when that random color thing changes, let's say only when it changes, I'll select a random color, and I'll go print. So I'll add a new line, and just to go through the MP script line options, there's set to set a variable, do to do an event, and whenever you need to, you can always hover over the line, this question mark, to see the description. But the main ones to do are the main ones to use are just set, do, if to check for a condition, and I can go for each to go through a list, and there's a few other ones, like I can add an after to do something after a second, which is actually what I'll do now. I'll go after 1 second, set that to true, and then I'll add a print line, which is just an easy way to print a line. So I'll go print line, I'll set that to um, it happened. There. And I'll put that at the start so it happens immediately. Okay, so now when I go into play mode and I edit the cube, I can go like that, it says it happened, and then it picks a random color. And so it'll do that every time that variable changes. So when you do add events, you can add multiple events and multiple conditions for this to happen. So what I could do, uh, I'll add an on collision component to this entity, just so when it collides with stuff, I can get what it collides with, and do things differently that way. So what I'll do is go back to the entity and I'll say on event, and then let's go in the on collision event. It's looking for an event now. I'll go collision. So on collision, print it happened, and then let's just set a random color when that happens. So because it collided with the ground, it picked a random color, and then prints that it happened. So one thing I could do too is I could keep adding conditions, or keep adding events. So unlike most code, MP script, you can just have this same block of code run on different events. So I could go or on event, let's say start. So it'll pick a random color at the start, and then also do that at when it collides. And I can also edit things while it's playing. So instead of start, let's go on in a main on update. And then it keeps randomly picking a color, but I'll remove that. And so one thing I could do is, now that I have this collision, what happens is that it comes with this collision info. Because on the collision event, it comes with this new variable, collision info, passed to it. So that's if I want to say get the information of what I hit with. So this collision info, let's just print the name of whatever I hit. So because I'm hitting the level, it'll probably say none, or it didn't hit anything. And then if I hit that thing, it says I hit the sci-fi door. So let's say I want to do something to what I hit. So I have this collision info. What I could do is I could go if collision info. Actually, let's just go do. So do collision info, and then the entity that it hit. So this will be the entity hit. We'll go main die. So what this says is that whatever we hit dies. And I'll still have that there to print the information. So now when I hit this door, it died, or this button. They didn't die that fantastically, so maybe I'll add a cylinder just to die a little bit better. And some random spheres. Now when this runs into it, it'll shatter those. So one thing I could do too, just to show the advanced debugging options, is I'll go into debug mode, and I'll remove that. So this time I'll say if collision info hit entity is set. So again, when you're adding these conditions, it always tells you what it's expecting. So because I added an if statement, it's expecting a bool, so a true or false value. So I'll go in, what was I doing? Oh, in collision info, the hit entity is, actually, you know what I'll do is I'll go relative speed, magnitude greater than 1. So if the speed is greater than 1 that I hit this collision at, then we'll go print, and we'll go set the color to random, and we'll do collision info hit entity main die. So this says, and I'll turn on debug mode in a bit to go through it, but this says on the collision, if the speed is greater than 1, then print it happened, so get a random color and destroy the thing that we hit with. So I'll add a few cubes to that we can actually hit. Okay, and then I'll go to play mode. So it did hit above 1 speed. Maybe I'll make that larger. I'll edit that, and I'll go magnitude greater than 5. So I can demonstrate just hitting it very quick, small. Yeah. There we go. So now what I'll do is I'll also print, let's go plus the speed, relative velocity, magnitude. So it'll say, oh, and I gotta go to text. Because it's expecting text, because it's adding to the text, I need to make it into text. So I'll go to text. And I'll edit that, instead of it happened, I'll go it happened at speed. There. It happened at the speed and prints the speed down there. So one thing I'll do now, if I wanted to uh, try get information on what's happening, I could pause the time for a bit, and then I'll turn on debug mode, and then I want to see what's going on when this collision happens. So what I'll do is I'll add a debug breakpoint right there. I'll unpause the game, and then when it hits the ground and it's over that speed, it pauses the game and stops at this point. So this is very like to debugging code normally, but it does allow you to do a lot more things than a lot of other languages in that way, where I can hover over to see the current values that everything is at. I can see if the collision was actually greater than 5, and it was. And the total magnitude, the total collision was 11.2 milliseconds, meters per second. And then I can step through the code and watch it change color, and then it didn't hit anything, so nothing will die. Okay, so to quickly go through a few more features before going into the AI editing, um, if I want to, I'll add another script and I'll go on. So if I want to say add my own events, like if I want to start adding code to add different events, I'll go new variable and I can go event variable, and then event 1, and I can go on the start. Let's go after 2 seconds, do event 1. So right now that calls that event. Nothing will really happen there, but now I can go on event 1, and then print it happened. Spelled wrong. So what that'll do is on the start, after 2 seconds, that'll actually be called, and then it happened will print. So these events can also have parameters. So what I'll do now is I'll add a new event, and I'll select the event with this 1 in it. So when I'm adding a variable type, it shows me these common variable lists, but there's actually a lot of different options that you can add in terms of different variable types, like dictionaries, events with 4 different parameters on them to pass different things, or physics material, that sort of thing. But I'll go back to common types and I'll go event variable, and I'll add an event with what we hit. So I'll go on event what we hit, and then on the collision event. So on, does it still have the collision component? No. Okay. On collision event. So I'll go component on collision with that. We want to, after 2 seconds, go do what we hit, and then pass in. See, it's still expecting an entity, so the collision info isn't an entity, but we need to go select in the collision info what we hit, and then this will print what we hit. So we'll go do one and then die. So again, print what we hit, only now rather than doing it right here, it's passing it to this event right here. And because I created an event out of it, I could now have other scripts or other components respond to that event. So actually what we'll do is I'll add a new script. Go create new script, another script, and then I'll actually copy that code that was there. So I'll go on event in component, we want to do that other component, so that's script 1, what we hit, and then respond to it there. So I'll cut that line and paste it right there, and then remove that. So now, when this event happens and we hit something, we can have other scripts, which could be in another entity, then respond to that and do something. So I'll add an after line just to have it happen a second later, and then I'll try that out. There we go. Took a while, but because we have 2 seconds there, then it waits, then it hits that, and then that takes a second. Okay, so I'll remove this script. So just to show a few more things before getting into AI programming, uh, when I do add a variable, I can add a default value for that variable. So I can add a text variable, and then let's go on collision, we'll just print that text value. But what I could do in code is, so when you add a variable, you can always edit it in the inspect window of the other entity that has it. So which component was that? That was script 1. I'll remove that. Script 1. And the text right there. I can now edit it and set that variable on that entity. But I'll go back to this entity and I'll set its default value for text1 to be Bob. Now when I look at this other component, it also has text1 as Bob, because that's the default value. But I can set it as Joe, and then it shows me that it's no longer the default value. When I hover over it, it says it returns Joe. But when I go to the scripting of this event, actually, of this entity, it doesn't have the on-collision event. It doesn't have that component. So you can see that that's grayed out for that reason. I'll go, and then now it's no longer like that. Okay, so to show a few more advanced variable types and options you can do, I'll add a variable to this that to get all the components in the level that have their custom material. So all these primitives have this set material thing, which sets their material, sets their color. So I'll change that to plastic. And this one I can go to grass. And I'll clone that a bunch of times. Okay. So I'll go back to the script and I'll add, I want to get a list of things with that set component. I want a variable that stores a list of other components in the world with that set material component. So I'll go add new variable, component variable type, and now I got to select which kind of component I want this to be. So I'll go set material, and I'll go shapes in level. Okay. So one thing I did is oh yeah, I forgot to actually make this a list. So what that should be, instead of that, I'll go to variable again, and I'll hit this as list. So that'll make this variable into a list, which can store multiple components. So I'll do that again, set material, and then list of shapes. Okay, so now that's a list, and when I go to edit it, I can add a few of them. And it will show me the set material options in the level. So it's just a few random ones, then I can hit this button to select the ones that I selected. So one thing I can do is I'll say at the start, rather than setting it in edit mode, I'll have npscript set it at the start. So I'll go set list of shapes, and we want in the world get all the components of that type. So in world entities components of type. It's looking for a component type, so I'll go set value and then of set material. And how many are there? There's 7. So I can highlight, I can always hover over it to see the current value. And then when I go to play mode, it shows me all the, it's all added to that list of shapes. So one thing I can do also is in npscript, everything can run in edit mode. And it's very easy to run in edit mode. So normally this start event would only happen at the start, but I can right click and I can run event code now. And that just runs in edit mode and sets all the values. Or so right now there's a kind of random selection, but I could go like let's say set it to that the list, but let's order it by its name. So right now it's ordered by automatically whatever its name is, and I'll run that code again, and now it's ordered, or was it ordered by? Let's go order by component to text to actually make it text first. There. Now it's ordered alphabetically by its name. If I want to do something else, I can also add more things to this, like more things that filter it more. So instead of components of type, I'll go. This gets kind of advanced. If it's like link statements in C#, but I can do this to sort of query the world and filter lists. So I'll go where, let's say we want anyone with that plastic material. So I'll go where material equals, and then it's looking for a material. I'll go set value, and then we want to go plastic. So now, with this giant statement, I'm saying anything with the set material where its material is plastic. So there's 7 total in the world, and there's only 3 that have that material plastic. So if I run that event code again, it now only selected the half pipe, which is these ones that are set to plastic material. Okay, so now I'll show a little bit of AI programming. I'll delete some of these, and I'll add in a humanoid, blank humanoid guy, and then I'll edit it. So if I go into its components, it has its movement AI script and a movement, which all things that move kind of share, or most things, the player and drones and really anything like that. And same with the movement AI script. And it has a walking movement because it has walking animations. It's an animated humanoid, and it has a humanoids component which sets its model. So I'll select that to robot player. So what I can do now is I'll go and add a script to it. New script, go and wave at player. Okay, so what we want this guy to do is at the start find the player and wave at him. So I'll go on event start, wait a few seconds. Let's go 2 seconds, and then it'll turn around and find the player and walk towards it. So what I want to do is set a few values in the movement AI. I want to set its target and its move goal. So its target is what the AI is looking at, and its move goal is where it's going and moving towards, which are normally the same thing, but not always the same thing. So target could be um, target is always an entity, like another entity it's looking at, but move goal could be a position in the world or entity that's going towards. So we want to set the move goal and the target to be the player. So we could do that by going set in component movement AI and set its move goal like that. And there's also a method to do that. So I'll go in component movement AI, set target and move goal. So when I set the move goal, I usually set the range of like how close I want it to go, the min max value. So if it's too close, it'll back up. If it's too far away, it'll keep going. So we want to do that to the player. So to get the current player, I'll go in the world and then players and select the player avatar. So it's important to know that there's a difference between this MP player and a player avatar, because an MP player could just be anyone connected to the game. They could be in edit mode, they could be spectating. The main player is just like the current host or anything like that. So instead of using the main player, what I'll do is I'll use the main player avatar. And this just says walk to the main player avatar. So I'll try that. It'll turn around and walk towards me very slowly and follow me. And if I go into my edit tool, I can edit it. And let's say, and I go to its values and look what its current values are. So it's looking at me as its target. I'm also its move goal, and then it's set to look at my center. I can change this to look at the eyes to look up, and it's within range. And its current distance is 0.86 away from its target. So I'll go options and die just to kill that guy for no reason. Okay, so now what I want him to do is I want him to wave at the player once he reaches him. So I'll go on event in the movement AI when its movement goal is reached. Let's go do in component animated humanoid, do animation clip. So I need to select an animation clip for him to do. There's a mod for full of animation clips, humanoid animation clips, so I'll enable that. And I can see in the assets screen, by going to the animation humanoid animation clips mod, all the animations that come with it. So I can see a preview of the animation. I'll go wave, and that'll be the one I'll use. So I'll edit this again, and we want to go wave. Set value, wave. And then there's a few other parameters I can set. Well, if I view it with text, I can see how it actually is set, where it's selecting the wave and from the human animation clips mod. This is the asset that it directly selected. So I could make a variable out of the animation, the humanoid animation clip if I wanted to, and then set that in there, then set that in the inspector, but instead I'm just setting it directly in code. So this do animation clip also comes with a few parameters that are automatically set. I can hover over it to see the value, or if I clear it, also show me what the value that's looking for is. This is torso only, so I don't want to do the animation just in the torso. This is loop, if I want the animation to loop, and the animation speed of how quickly I do the animation. So you know what, I'll also add a different animation. I'll go after, let's say, 3 seconds. Let's copy that and paste it just to save me a second of time. And then we'll add a new one. Dancing Samba, whatever that is going to be. So after 3 seconds, do the Dancing Samba. And we'll go play. He walks over to me. I'll walk closer to him. He waves. And then, what's he going to do next? Does the Dancing Samba, apparently. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to do is actually make this AI an enemy and attack the player. So remove this and these entities. And actually, I'll go in the voxel tool and quickly make a little wall for him to go beyond. There we go. Okay, so we'll go to world settings, and then what do I need to make sure that the AI will be able to find the player. So right now, if I just set the AI directly at the player, he'll try to walk through that wall. So I'm going to go to game and then use pathfinding. And then when I go into play mode, it generates the pathfinding, and I can see how it generated it. So it's going to be able to walk around that wall. So now what we want him to do is we're going to give him some different AI. So I could do everything custom, but there's a few in this mod AI scripts, comes with a few common AI scripts to use. So I'll remove all this, and I'll start adding one of the other components. So I'll go add component, add MP script, and there's what we want him to do is shoot his held gun. So if I add this shoot held gun, it'll add, because it requires a few components, it requires to search for any component and the team component. It'll add those. And now when I go into the entity, it has these new components. This search for entity component that I can set, if it's enabled, I can set how quickly, how much it should move towards the enemy, what kind of range, how far, what's its sight, and a few options for how it's going to shoot its held gun at the player. And then team sets its current team. So these scripts use that team component to check who they should attack. So because this is an enemy, I'll select them on the enemy team. You can create your own teams in assets, or you can name teams, anything like that, or you can not have them be on a team. Players default to the player team. So I'll stick with enemy. I'll remove that go and wave at player script. So these are the scripts that come in the AI scripts mod, which are you can edit by overriding them. This will say every second look for a new player, enemies within distance, and then it gives on the team component has this enemies within distance option, and I'm giving it this variable that's set here, which defaults to 20. And I also had this variable that was added to say if it should check the site. So these are just, you could do those directly through the code there, or you could add variables, which this does, so that it can easily be set there. And then it's saying enemies within distance, and get the first value and set that to this new enemy, this local variable new enemy. So this says if new enemy is set, set the current enemy to this new enemy and move and set your target move goal at that enemy. And then if it's not set, set the last enemy spot, which is this variable, which is right here, last enemy spot, vector, so a position in the world. Set the last enemy spot to whatever the current enemy's position was, so the last time you saw them. He's now at a site, so remember where you saw him and move that, and set your move goal to that. And then this line right here says on damaged, if the health system is damaged, set who damaged as the current enemy. Actually, this says set if who damaged you was on the other team and you don't have an enemy, then set the move goal to where that happened. So like if I snipe this character from far away, he then becomes aware of me where I was, and he comes after me. He doesn't set me as the current enemy, he just knows that was the last position that I was and goes after me. And then it has this shoot held gun component, which is This will just say on every update, and if we have a current enemy, then set this toggle to check if we can actually see the enemy, and then set our gun to fire. So I'll go to values, and I'll give him a weapon. We want to give him a laser bow, which is going to kill me very quickly, but we'll see how that goes. And I'll go to play mode. So now he can't see me, but then he can. And you can see that what I'll do is I'll pause the game, and I'll go to my edit tool. I can't see him yet. You can see his pathfinding trying to find the player, which he's not using as he runs up that thing. Okay, so lastly what I'll show is a few of the other AI types. So I got this drone mod. I'll add a bunch of enemies for him to fight, so I'll add some drones. Maybe one hover tank, and then I'll add a dude on this guy's side, so another heavy bot with the assault rifle. So I'll edit him, and I'll make sure the team of him is select the enemy, and I'll put these guys on my team. Select both of them, select a team to be player, and you can check out the components they have. So they have the same script, the search for enemy. Instead of that shoot held gun at player, they have their shoot charge gun, which just means because these guys, this hover tank, has a gun component directly on it, which is set to this drone bullet, it's going to actually shoot the gun. So rather than this, like these guys, which are holding something which shoots, they're holding a gun. These guys actually are just a gun. They have a gun component on them, which is set to drone bullet, and the same with this one. They both have the script shoot charge gun at enemy, and this says every update, if we do have a current enemy, then and we can see him, then set trigger down, so actually start firing, and we can go to play mode to check it out. Okay, so they don't see each other yet. Maybe what I'll do is just edit this, and so they can actually see each other, and start the battle. There, now you guys can see each other. And the humanoids won horribly. And I'll add a thing to kill them with. Oh my god. Okay, killed me. Well, that's what enough. I think that's all I'm going to show for this video. I think that's it. So maybe I'll do more scripting videos in the future. I think one big thing I haven't shown is all the game manager stuff and all the options you have there. This is like the default game managing, which just adds the player and the default stuff for adding the UI screens. So all this can be, you can override all of this. I can go to the player manager, override it, and clear it. And same with the UI manager. I'll override that also, and then clear it. And then now when I go into play mode, nothing will happen because I'm not set to spawn. But yeah, so that can just be, so the player manager is set to just add the default settings of like spawn players use a spawn point, and then when they die respawn. But you can override that to be like, say if they should spawn on a certain team or if they should spawn as a prop. Just anything you want to do, you can then set in the player manager or the UI manager to override, say, if they shouldn't have a death screen, if they shouldn't have an option to restart. You can set everything, or they should have a custom UI HUD. Everything like that can be set in the UI manager. And the creation manager is just there to, as a default blank one that you can set per creation with just these update and start events. And yeah, that's it.